basically, I'm just trying to like broaden my kind of I'm trying to diversify my practice and try and learn
Yeah,
all these different practices within theatre so that I can draw from as much as possible when I'm working.
yeah. That's
Um,
such a good idea.
and that includes practices within theatre, but also practices outside of theatre. So, for example, outside of theatre, I'm like drawing from loads of different movement practices that I've never encountered before, or that I have a bit and haven't really explored fully, um, as well as like just absorbing and watching like loads of different things. And my mate told me the other day, um, have you seen Avatar,
Yeah,
The Legend of Aang? No,
yeah, yeah.
Avatar, The Last Airbender. That's it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
Um,
actually thought it was a decent film, but it didn't get a sequel. But yeah, I have seen it.
I've not seen the film, but have you seen the animated series?
Oh, I've seen some of it. Yeah, yes and no, but yeah, I know what you're on about.
But yeah, basically, I used to watch as a kid, and I was obsessed. Like it was one of my favorite shows, and I
Oh,
haven't watched it. Obviously, like haven't watched it since I was a kid. And my mate was just saying how apparently when they were making that, each of the different like elements is based on a different martial art,
oh wow, that's so
and
cool.
the way they move is influenced by that martial art and by that element and the kind of things that are the kind of movements that are associated with that element.
Yeah,
And like straight away, I was making links to um, Lecoq work. So I was reading this
yeah.
Lecoq book, and his use of like the natural elements. Um, so I've started rewatching Avatar, and I'm loving it. It's so good.
Oh, that's so good. I didn't know that. To be fair, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so I'm not watching as a kid now. Like I'm still watching it as a kid on the inside. Like I'm still enjoying it in that way. But I'm also watching it and I'm like, oh, like, it's so true. Like you can see how it's really cool how they've actually kind of choreographed all these different movements
Yeah,
to correlate with
that
the
yeah,
elements and things like that. And it's got a lot of scope for movement stuff.
yeah, definitely. No, like 100%. Like that. No, that's such a good thing as well to notice. Like didn't even know that. That's a fun fact. Um,
Yeah. So for example, yeah. So I'm just like drawing from loads of random places, and I figured like music is something that I've always used in my work, and
yeah,
I love to use music. But my actual knowledge of music, from like technical stuff all the way to more creative stuff, and the reasons why people make certain decisions when they're choosing music or working with music, I have absolutely no clue like what goes into any of that. But I thought
um,
musical direction is one that I want to kind of ask about. So yeah, if you want to, so yeah,
yeah,
just
for
what
sure.
what it involves first of all, like what the role actually, if you had to put a label on it, what you'd say it was.
Yeah. So I can only speak from like my experience of doing it.
Okay,
But
yeah,
yeah, musical director. Um, it's kind of it's actually they say, and I don't know if this is true, but everyone says that it's one of the hardest roles because you kind of have to juggle everything. Um, it's obviously in the title that you're in charge of everything to do with the music in the show, and what that means is often the music, pretty much nearly always, the musical director is the piano player, and they are the person that conducts the music and teaches the music and yeah, is basically in charge of putting it all together and checking that it works with the piece. So like they get the final say on stuff to do with music. Um, yeah. So in terms of like how it relates to actors, um, my role when I've done it is I've had to be in the room the whole time, and in a very similar way to like how directors do it. We go through the music. Often you're given a score. It's all different as well. It depends if you're working with new music or stuff like Spotify, or if you're using an actual score if you're doing a musical.
mm.
So if you were doing a musical, you'd get the score, and then in rehearsals you'd teach the music, go through it, and then basically you'd direct the actors on how you want them to approach it. So the way I did it when I did Threepenny was, because that was more of a musical, and quite a lot of people in our cast weren't the most confident singers.
Right. Yeah.
So I approached it as more of a like directing people on how to act through song, which I think is entirely like quite important when it comes to theatre stuff. Because a lot of people like weren't confident in like, so you work on all the technical stuff on like building up their voice, and working on like scales and whatever it is, and getting them to project properly and use their diaphragm and breathing, and you do all those technical things. But then actually when it comes down to the actual song, what we did a lot, especially with people like Ned and Barney Nunn, they weren't like the most confident. So like I went through it with them. We basically found a lot of moments where they could like act it, and then we'd kind of like play around with it and like see like how much they wanted to like shout it or like whatever. And you just work with the director to make sure that it's like they're happy with it, and you're not like going too off the line. And then in terms of the kind of orchestral side of it, if you're dealing with a band or an orchestra, you're in charge of the conducting, basically making sure like the tempo is the right speed for the actors to sing, and making sure it all like works well, making sure that the instrumentalists are like happy with what they're doing, and you add in like dynamics and like where you want it to like change and flow, and where you want it to like be accentuated and like loud or whatever. And then that's all kind of like musical based.
I mean, that sounds really broad. Like from what you've just said there, it sounds like as a movement director, you're bridging the gap between voice coach, conductor, and director.
Yeah, essentially.
Which is obviously a lot, and that involves technical, like a technical side and a creative side, right?
Yeah, 100%. So normally you'd work on the technical side first. So first things first, you literally, it's as simple as you'd learn the songs, you learn the notes, you learn whatever you're doing, you learn the words, you learn how to sing it.
Yeah, this is before you even start working with actors, right?
Oh yeah. As the musical director, you have to, before you even get in the room for the first rehearsal, you need to know all the songs, all the music, and have an idea of like what you want to do with it, so that when you come into the room, the first thing you kind of have to do is explain what your intentions are with the piece, and how you want it to kind of sound. And you've usually had that discussion already with the director, and if you're working with a choreographer or movement director, you'll have had that discussion already. So like if you're doing, we had like a kind of like tango style piece in Threepenny. So before we even got in the room, I had to discuss with Raff and Saxon like what they wanted that to look like, because we didn't have a choreographer, like they were kind of doing it. We had to discuss like, sorry?
I said tut tut tut.
Yeah, exactly.
It's taking my role away.
I know. So I had to like chat with them and basically ask them like what they were going for. Like, were they going for like a sexy vibe? Were they going for more of a like traditional tango, like strict time signature? Were they going for something that was a bit kind of fluid and loose? Yeah. So we had all those discussions, and then when you speak to the actors the first rehearsal, you usually like play them the music so they can have a feel of, that's literally what we did actually. Every time when we did the read through, every time the music came in, we played the soundtrack. But actually what you probably do in a more professional setting is you probably play it yourself on the piano.
Yeah.
My skills were not that good, so we played the soundtrack. But yeah, and then that's like the first sort of things that you do. Then you teach the song, and then that's where your creative input kind of can start happening, and you can kind of shape it to how you want it to sound. And what we did in Threepenny is I kind of directed the song sections. Raff and Saxon, like for some of them would be like, I want them to walk here, I want them to do this in it, I want them to stand here. But for most of them, I kind of said, like, this is the way I want you to sing it, and like you just like move accordingly, and we'll see what that looks like. But I think that maybe depends on like show to show.
Yeah, I guess that's a conversation with the director.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a massive juggling act, and you have to constantly make sure that the songs are lining up with what the directors want or the director wants.
Yeah.
And especially if you're working with a choreographer, like you have to take it, like consider that they're going to be dancing and they're not going to have the same breath control. So for one of the songs we had to do, I had to make sure that like, they were constantly moving when they were practicing, so that they could get used to like doing it while doing something else, and like because they sounded great, and then we'd start moving and they wouldn't be able to breathe. Nice. So it's just stuff. Yeah. It's all quite straightforward stuff, like just the stuff that you kind of imagine, but it just becomes quite.
You see, I don't think everyone would have thought of that. So I don't think if I was movement director in a piece, I need to remember that if they're going to be speaking or singing, to have them speaking or singing while moving, because that's their movement affects their breath, which affects their voice. But I think it works the other way around as well. Obviously, if they're speaking, then they're out of breath, which means they can't move in a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same as well if you're not even just moving, but there's a difference between singing when you're sitting down and singing when you're standing up.
Yeah.
Especially for people that aren't that confident, they'll sing better when they're standing up. Right. So if suddenly in the scene they're crouched on the floor and they're lying on the floor and they've got to sing, it's a completely different experience, and you have to like train yourself to like know how to project properly when you're in different positions.
Right.
So that's another thing that can affect like how it'll sound. Or like even if they're facing the back or whatever, you have to, as a musical director, make sure that they know where they're placing their voice so that they are always heard, and like it sounds good rather than just kind of trading away.
In times like that, do you need to tell them how to sit? Like, do you say, okay, sit up straight, or try facing this way, or do you almost take on the role of movement, like a movement director?
Sometimes, yeah. So, if, for example, like the movement director or choreographer has said they're going to be in this position, and like maybe their shoulders are hunched over and they're curled up, I would say to them, you can do that. You can do that physicality, but the diaphragm and like the chest needs to be like lifted a little bit, and otherwise you're blocking your voice from getting out. And I try and find a way to make sure that if they could like bring their head up so that it kind of like the voice comes out a bit more. So it's kind of like finding that balance between, or you'd find a moment in the song where like that's okay to do it, but then if they've got a big belty note coming up, you would have to adjust it so that they could support their voice. Otherwise they'll lose their voice literally the next day if they're not supporting it properly.
Right. Yeah.
So that's another thing. Like, it's the same with movement. Like, you always have to do a warm up, and I think quite a lot of the time directors and stuff, they get a bit frustrated because they're like, oh, it's just a vocal warm up. But if you don't, you are in danger of losing your voice, especially if it's like a show that you're doing a lot. So yeah, it sounds really standard, but like it's just something that sometimes people forget. And I think in terms of what you usually have in any show that you're doing with a band or an orchestra is you have a sitz probe, which is basically the first rehearsal. It's almost like a read-through when you do it with actors, but it's the first rehearsal where the band, orchestra, come together with the singers, actors, whoever. And usually that just takes place with the actors will just be sitting down, and then they'll stand up whenever they have their song, just because it means that the musical director, it's like the one chance the musical director has to kind of get the singing and get everything like exactly right and together, because otherwise then you start adding acting on top of that and movement, and then it all kind of goes. So you just kind of like build up the blocks. So yeah, that sits probe, basically the musical director like just takes over. Like the directors aren't involved. I mean, they're there, but they're not doing anything. And yeah, it's quite tedious because you basically have to go back and forth a lot and like try out different speeds and try out different things. And then you would probably, then the band would stay there for the rest of the time that you're rehearsing.
Right.
And then when you're adding stuff like movement and stuff on top of that, then you can play around with it again, and if it needs to change, it changes. So yeah, that's kind of the job in a nutshell. But it really, same with anything, it kind of differs on what you're doing. So like, I've been musical director for this show that I'm doing at the moment, but it's been a bit weird because we had to change the whole concept. So originally, it was going to be like a musical kind of vibe, and we were going to compose the music ourselves, and there were going to be little like things and like songs in between scenes, and it just wasn't going to happen over Zoom. So we've changed it, but we've still got a couple of like musical elements. So there's one thing that I composed, which is kind of like a choral thing. But it probably doesn't relate that much to movement stuff because it's all just a bit. It's all done online. So
how are you doing choral stuff online?
Yeah. So what I had to do is I composed it's a 4-part harmony, and I just composed it on the piano, and then I put that into this software on my laptop to basically make sure that everyone's in time. And I recorded all the different individual lines separately, sent them off to each of the people, and then got them to sing at the same, put their headphones on so they could hear the soundtrack and sing alongside it.
Okay,
but I could only hear their voices. And then they sent it back to me, and I put them together on GarageBand, which was actually such a nightmare because people didn't sing in time. But yeah, I got them to do that. So we put it all together, and then that was that done. So yeah.
Nice. And how does it sound?
I think it sounds alright. I tend to just write stuff that's really like sad, and it's not meant to be sad. And I thought it was alright. I deliberately tried to make it happier. And then we got this comment from this director that we were working with, and she was like, "Oh, it just sounds really sad." And I was like, "Oh no," but we're still using it because we took a long time to do that. Yeah, I can send it to you if you want. It's only short. It's like 30 seconds.
Is it in the piece?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll wait till I see the piece.
Oh yeah, you'll hear it. It's kind of in the background, so yeah,
I'll keep an ear out for a really sad sounding piece of choral music.
It's right at the beginning. You won't miss it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's kind of everything in a nutshell. And again, it kind of really depends on job to job. And I know like Flynn, like he's an amazing musical director because we worked with him for Pippin. And he was just so good, like so professional, like the way he was doing everything. And that was very much that was a very dance heavy show. And we were like, there was one number that we did that basically every time they repeat it, it gets faster and faster, and the dancing gets faster. And yeah, it was intense. But he was really, really good at like, he just kind of knew how to change it and how to, like the dynamic between him, Anton, and Lucy as like director, choreographer, and musical director is like what to aim for. Like it was so good.
I think that relationship is so important because I think because each of those 3 roles have so much crossover into the other roles, it's like it can be a recipe for disaster. But if it works well, it's like you're working as one unit, like you're almost just one being with 3 heads.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it was very, like, it definitely felt like that as well. Like, because we obviously had Anton doing more of the acting stuff, but Flynn and Lucy were also able to, like, chip in. Like, if it kind of related to something, even, like, if it was to do with the voice, like, Flynn would be like, you need to, like, project it more like this or whatever, because he was speaking more from a kind of, like, musical side, I guess.
Yeah.
And, like, even if we, maybe, like, moved over the wrong way, like Lucy would be able to step in and be like, okay, like you're blocking that person, because she could see the movement side of it, even though like technically that was Anton's responsibility.
Yeah.
But I think that relationship, you have to have the right dynamic of like, this is my thing. You have that relationship where like you've got your own roles, but also like I could chip in and be like, okay, this is how you should maybe move or act or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all about trust, I think. Like, you got to trust in the other person that they can do their role well, but also they need to trust that if you're going to chip in, you have a reason to, or you kind of, it's coming from a genuine place.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about the kind of creative process, and like the more personal this is, the better.
Okay.
But when you're approaching a show, so this is like early stages, very, very early, when you're, like you said, trying to find what the show's going to sound like, the kind of sound for the show,
Yeah.
or project, whatever you're doing. What is your kind of process, and like what do you look at? So how do you decide, for example, how like quick paced you want it, like what the kind of like energy level is? I don't know the technical terms, but you know what I mean. And like
Yeah.
like what kind of instruments you're going to use, like what, I know a lot of it is probably written into the script, but say if you're approaching something and you have the space to be a bit more original, a bit more creative, maybe you're composing your own stuff, how do you decide what's going to fit and what isn't?
That is a good question. Yeah, I think maybe I'll talk about it more from like how I've approached this show, or like would have approached it if we'd done the stage version. Just because, as you say, like a lot of the time it's in the score. It'll say on the top, you know, this is like quick, this is slow, this is you know, whatever. I mean, you play around with it after that, but if you're approaching it more from I'm going to compose this piece, or what sort of song should I choose and how should I, I, in quite a similar way to how I approach scripts or concepts, if you're starting from a concept, we'll go with that because that's what we did with this show.
Yeah.
If you're starting from a concept, an idea, I tend to think about like what sort of themes from that spring to mind. So for this show that we're doing, we knew from when we came up with the idea it was going to be based at a wedding, and we knew it was not going to involve the two people getting married, and it was going to be an after party. So like immediately from that, like I started writing down like a load of ideas of like what, like just words, like phrases, things that I think about when I think about a wedding after party. Okay. Which is like loud, chaotic, noisy, a little bit cheesy, a little bit like lovey-dovey, like romance, like all of those sort of words that like I associate with weddings, and like specifically like the after party part, like maybe relief, or like we spoke a lot about the people that would be there and how like there's always arguments at weddings, or like there's always little things where like you see people that you might not want to see, and or you meet people that you'd never meet otherwise. It's just you're in this kind of weird environment that like everyone's there. And originally our original idea was we were going to be kids at the wedding, and we were going to be adults playing children, so we were like reading books like Blue Remembered Hills and stuff like that, and then we changed that. But initially we were like, I wanted to kind of like capture that like youthful like kind of innocence, and how you overhear things. Like we were talking about how kids at weddings just kind of left to just do their own thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that was like the first kind of step, I'd say. And then I kind of went away and thought about what songs like realistically would actually appear in a wedding after party, because we wanted to have some that were realistic, and then some that, you know, the characters would just break out into song. So we had stuff like the wedding singer, who we thought, oh, that could be like a nice opening to like you walk into the room and you've got this wedding singer playing with like a band in the background. And then stuff like karaoke, like you might get karaoke that's happening, or like maybe the bridesmaids like created a speech, and in it like she's like, we're gonna have this ridiculous thing where like I played the flute like in the speech and all of this stuff, like doing the speech. Yeah, like because basically, to be fair, I'm playing a very similar character now. It's my character's gone on a very strange journey. It went from being a child to the bridesmaid to a 70-year-old Scottish grandmother, and now it's back to like a very precocious perfectionist person. So. Yeah,
because the last time I spoke to you, it was at the grandma stage.
Yeah, which oh my gosh, it's only changed in the past like 10 days, 2 weeks, and like we started filming on Monday, so it's been a journey. But yeah,
Nice range there at least.
yeah, exactly. It was fun to play around with. So yeah, we had this ridiculous thing where they were like, "Oh my god, like you should be like a complete like crazy person who like gets up and like starts playing the flute," because she's like, "Oh, look at this thing that I've done." So I just wrote down a list of like those sort of ideas, and then we kind of decided on which ones we wanted to play around with. And then the next stage was like, as you said before, like what is this going to sound like? So for the initial wedding singer, I was trying to think about what might work well in terms of how we wanted the audience to like enter the room. And like in the same sort of way that you would if you were directing it, like how you want the audience to feel as they're walking in, if there's like a preset or whatever. And we decided we wanted them to feel like welcome, like chill, like they want to get involved, because our show is going to be quite audience interactive heavy. So we wanted to kind of create this vibe that was very like welcoming and what's the word, like a party atmosphere,
like
but
lowering
like,
inhibitions kind of thing. Like you want them to get involved.
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted them to feel like they were part of it, and as if like they were actually guests coming to the wedding.
Yeah.
So that's when I wanted to create this kind of like jazz sort of like ballad for this girl who has the most incredible voice, but she's actually trained in musical theatre, so like it's another thing that you have to kind of like balance like how her voice would like work with it. But I was like, no, it'll work, it'll be fine. So yeah, that's how I started thinking about it, and then I just kind of went away and started listening to like jazz pieces, and then COVID happened and that got cut. But yeah, but one of the things that wasn't, oh no, it is kind of cut now. Oh yeah, so another one that we were going to do is when we were doing the flute piece, they were like, "Can you make it interactive?" I was like, "What? Like, how am I going to make a flute piece interactive?" So we came up with like I was trying to like write this like loads of ideas, and I decided that I was going to try and compose like an Irish jig, and then I was going to have like little breaks in it that we get the audience to like clap. So it would kind of be like, I don't know, like and like then they'd always like join in on the clap.
Yeah.
And then it would just get like faster and faster, and it would just be nuts. And then we'd try and get everyone up like dancing, and then it would like break out into some like pop song. So yeah, I don't know.
That sounds bonkers. That sounds mental.
I'm so gutted that we weren't able to do it.
I would have been right up there getting involved.
Because they were like, "Can it just be like a really bad piece?" And then I was like, "Oh yeah, it could." And then actually we thought, like, wouldn't it be funny if like the thing that like you just wouldn't expect that you get up dancing to is like some random girl on the stage with like the flute, but like you slowly like get everyone involved by like clapping, and then it just gets more and more like crazy. So yeah, that's how that happened.
Have you seen Anchorman?
No, I haven't. I've seen parts of it, but not the whole thing.
Have you seen the scene with the flute?
No, I haven't, but I was guessing there was a flute. Is it good?
I feel like you really enjoy Anchorman. Like,
I need to watch it, yeah.
I feel like, yeah, you're kind of comedy. But there's this scene where, so it's Will Ferrell, and like, he's playing an Anchorman, but he just plays the flute, like, for some reason. He's really good at the flute. And there's this scene where he's playing the flute at I think it's a party, or it might be a club or something, and he sets it on fire, and he's like doing this crazy flute solo with this flute with fire coming out at the end of it. Everyone's going crazy.
Oh my god!
I'm just picturing that. Film now. Even if you just search up Anchorman flute scene, you won't regret it.
Oh my gosh! Yes, I need to watch that.
Give it a watch. Yeah, it's so good.
Oh no, I'm definitely gonna watch that. Yeah, I don't know. That was very like step by step, like sort of how I would maybe approach stuff in terms of like you start with like it's really similar to like script stuff. You start with like what the feeling is, like what sort of themes come out of it, and then you like go from there to like specific ideas. And it literally all it is with music is you just pinpoint specifically like what that song is going to be about, and then you go further, and it's like, okay, well, what needs to happen in this song? Like, if it's storytelling, like, what do you want to, like, what point needs to come in, and then you'd kind of write the lyrics around that, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. When I've had to pick music for anything, I've always like made sure to strike like the difference between music that is like fits it contextually, and then music that fits it stylistically.
Yeah.
So like music, for example, if you're like, it's like you said, if it's a wedding, you thought about the music they would play at a wedding, an after party, but you also thought about the vibe at a wedding after party and the music that correlates with that, but they wouldn't necessarily play at actually play at a wedding after party.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I think that's really interesting. And coming back to movement, it's a similar thing. Like if I'm thinking of movement at a wedding after party, there's obviously like dance moves, like shitty dancing, all that kind of stuff that you'd see at a wedding after party. But then there's also the vibe of a wedding after party, and then the way using those kind of words. So like you said, like kind of uplifting, fun, loud, chaotic. And
exactly.
Bringing that into the movement. So even if someone's like eating a sandwich, how can they do that in a really loud, chaotic, fun way?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's really similar to just theatre and movement. Like, it's the same kind of steps, I guess, that you apply. You just think about it in more of a musical way, and like how people hear it. But did you see The Wedding by Gecko?
The Wedding?
Yeah, I think it's called The Wedding.
No. I saw the Institute. I think it was called, with Emil. I don't think I watched Wedding or The Wedding.
I think it's on YouTube. I watched it on YouTube.
Oh right.
I think it's still there, and it's not long. It's only half an hour.
Okay. Yeah.
And you would actually love it. And I watched that before we started working on the show, just not for any reason, just happened to. And it was like the movement. I think you'll love it because I thought it was incredible. But the movement was amazing because they did that kind of, like, as you're saying, like the classic thing that you do at a wedding. Like, they'd clink glasses, but then they'd fall back and they'd like swirl into like this kind of like dream like kind of sequence, as if it I don't know, it was just so beautiful to watch. And then they'd go into like walking down the aisle, and then they'd fall back again. But it was like mind blowing to watch because it was amazing. And then it literally just takes a like completely different turn.
Right, yeah.
Which you'll know if you watch it. But yeah, it was so cool.
It's a stage piece, right? Or is it?
Yeah. It was done like 2-3 years ago. That might be very wrong. It might be older than that, but I think it was fairly recent.
I have heard of it. I've never watched. I didn't know it's on YouTube, and then it's only half an hour.
I came across it. Hang on, let me pop you on speaker now. Let me just see if it's still on there, because I think it's called The Wedding, but it might be called something slightly different. The Wedding.
I'm pretty sure there is a Gecko show called The Wedding.
Yeah. Oh no, it's called The Time of Your Life.
Oh.
That was the one I watched. But yeah, you're right. There is a show called The Wedding.
Okay,
That's I got confused. Yeah, it's called The Time of Your Life. It's not actually about a wedding, but there is a wedding bit in it. That's why I remember it.
Wait, is it the one where it's like in a TV studio?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. Oh,
there you go.
Yeah. Because, not gonna lie, when you're speaking about it, I was like, this sounds very familiar to this other show that I watched. I think was Gecko as well.
That's my bad.
I was gonna say, oh yeah, they're like their transitions are so good. Like, thinking it's something to do with all their shows, but obviously we're talking about the same show.
No, exactly. No, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
That's the process thing, I think.
Nice. Yeah. Is there any instances where you'd use recorded music instead of live music? Other than logistics of just, not having the people to play the music. What do you call them? Musicians, that's it. What do you call people that play music?
Just those people. The people that yes, there are instances. If it was a sequence at maybe had to be quite exact and quite timed, and it was the sort of thing that was quite complicated and needed to be like very in time with each other.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah.
I would use recorded because live music is live and there's no guarantee that it's always going to be at the same time, so especially if you were doing something like very quick with like movement. Not saying you couldn't do it with live music, but you might find that it would be easier to do it with recorded stuff.
Yeah.
What else would I use it? I think if for more of a creative side of things, I quite like using a combination of live and recorded. I don't know why, it just brings something a little bit different, because I think if you're trying to portray like things that are maybe real and then things that are imagined or things that are kind of a bit more, what's the right word, surrealist, then you might want to like play around with like how live music and how recorded music could be used for either.
Oh yeah,
so,
that's really interesting,
like,
actually.
Yeah, so like some people would say, oh, I'd use the live music for like the surrealist moments because it's like beautiful, but I'd actually probably do it the other way around. I'd do the live music for the real stuff.
Yeah, see, that's the approach.
Feels...
That's the first kind of approach I thought in my head, because when you said live, I think real, because it's real people playing real instruments.
And it like real instruments and real, like it just brings kind of presence, and I just think when you have that, there's like this kind of, whenever you like an instrument's played in the room, there's this kind of like just feeling that you get. I don't know what it is, but I always just think like it just brings me. Some people think the other way around. Some people think it like takes them on like another journey, but I think it really like brings me into the room and like focuses on like what's happening.
Yeah.
And then I sometimes like recorded music. Sometimes I just find easier to just like not shut off, but kind of just lie back and just kind of like let it happen.
Yeah.
So that's like I think that could be really interesting to play around with. When else would I use recorded music? Yeah, it depends on the piece. I think if you're doing stuff with voiceover stuff and it needs to kind of be in the background, recorded music, like practically you can turn the volume down, whereas live music, like it sounds stupid, but it's sometimes like even when you ask them to play it quietly, like they just can't. Like musicians they're like, no, I want to be in the forefront.
Yeah, I guess it's harder for like percussionists as well, isn't it? Because sometimes you need to hit it
exactly
hard enough to actually make the sound you need it to make.
Exactly, and also, like I know from flute, if you're playing notes that are high, it's so difficult to play that quietly, because you need a lot of like breath to support it. And the same with like singing. If you're trying to sing a high note quietly, like you have to be quite like trained to do it. So literally, just from a practical point of view, if you wanted something that sounded like it was off in the distance, you could use live music, but like recorded music would also work.
Yeah, I really like what you said there about live music and recorded music and where you'd use each one. I think, like, for example, like if I'm seeing someone perform the same piece of music that I've got, on my headphones, if someone's performing it live, I couldn't close my eyes and just sit back. Like, I'd have to watch them, because it is a performance.
But see, what's so funny about that, so when we were in Prague with the girls, I was, like, I'm such a sucker for classical music. Like, that's probably where a lot of, like, my influences come from. Whenever I do things, it's always quite, like, from a classical point of view.
Yeah.
But I was desperate to see this. Like, they have loads of different orchestras and bands that play, but there was one that sounded really good. It was like a Mozart concert or whatever. And I was like, oh, it'd be beautiful. Like, we can go sit in this cathedral. And they were like, yeah, we'll go. And literally within 10 minutes, Marion fell asleep. Like, I'm not even joking. She was snoring next to us. And I looked across, and Libby was asleep. Genna, did she fall asleep? I think Genna was awake for most of it. Like, or maybe it was Eden that fell asleep. I can't remember. Out of the five of us, I stayed awake the whole time. So Mariam was honestly like asleep for all of it. She was just nodding away, like nodding in and out. And Yeah, and I looked over and I was like, this is mad, because they were literally, like, they were only a couple of rows in front of us, these people playing these instruments. But it must have just been, I don't know, we were maybe a bit tired as well.
Did you have a late night the night before?
Not really. There was no excuse for it. No, joking.
It might be the music. Was it quite mellow?
Yeah. So I think, like, when they sat down, Marion was enjoying it so much that I think she just kind of closed her eyes for a moment, just to kind of, like, take it all in, and then just nodded off. But it was the same with Livy. Was like, she was like, I know, it was so beautiful, and she came out from it, like, really, like, fresh and awake. Yeah. And she was like, it was so beautiful, but I couldn't help but close my eyes, because I was just, like, it just made me sleepy, and it made me quite, like, lethargic. Whereas, like, for me, it did the opposite. Like, I was watching it and, like, trying to take in the room around me, and trying to, like listen to, like, all the different, like, harmonies that are happening. I don't know, that it's just quite interesting that live music does different things for different people. And another thing that's, like, that I remember what I was going to say now. Another thing that you can definitely play around with is having the musician or singer actually present and on the stage. I love it when shows do that. Yeah, and there's just something about it, and you can play around with that. Like, obviously, like, in theatre we do sing and we do stuff like that, but, you know, like, when you can hear a voice, maybe if it's coming behind you and you don't know where it is, and then suddenly, like, that person appears on stage and, like, is singing, and you're like, oh, like, didn't think, like, that person would be singing. I don't know, like, there's just something about it. Or, like, when we went to watch Come From Away, their band are on the stage the whole time, and they're part of the, like, acting. And so there's the scene that they go into the tavern or whatever, and they're all violin playing, like, the drummer, like, comes straight to the front of the stage, and they're fully, like, dancing as they're playing, and, like, everyone's like, yeah, like, loving it, like, and it was just such a, like, oh my gosh, like, that would happen. Yeah. And it was just such a cool moment. I don't know, it was just something about seeing that person, like, actually playing it, like, in front of you. You're like, oh wow, it's pretty cool.
I feel like when you see a piece with musicians on stage, you see them as real, and you see the actors as, like, fake. You see them as, like, characters, but you see the musicians as who they really are. So when the musicians get involved, you're like, oh yeah, go on, like, like it's an actual person getting involved, like it's one of you.
Yeah, that's the thing, because when you walk in, they were already on stage, and you're like, oh, they're just the band. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, they start, like, acting, and they started, like, joining in, like, and their expressions, like, they're obviously actors and musicians, because, like, they were pretty good. And, like, stuff was happening, they would be reacting to it or whatever, and they'd go off stage at the same time that the actors would go off stage. Right. And so it was very much like they were part of the company, but at the same time, they were just the band. Yeah. It was really cool. Yeah, so, like, there's so much you can do to play around with, like, liveness and recorded, and, like, combining the two. Like, I think that could be so interesting to have someone actually playing, but, like, battling it out with, like, a recorded thing. I don't know, like, there's just something about it.
I think... Yeah, like, with live and recorded music, that's two different ways of playing the music. But I think there's different ways of listening as well. It's like what you said with you compared to the other girls. Like, you were both clearly listening, but you were listening a different way. Like, you were hearing all the technical aspects of it and, like, really admiring them, whereas they were just listening to the music as a whole, kind of just letting it carry them. Yeah. And it's funny the different effects it had. Like, it energized you, but put them to sleep in a nice way. It reminds me of this TED Talk I watched. So I have been listening to a lot more classical music recently since I got back from Thailand. So I don't know why. I think I just started listening to a few pieces because that Theo showed me, and I was like, oh, this is really cool, and then just really, really got absorbed by it. And I watched this TED Talk on classical music, and I can't remember who the guy was. You'll probably know who he was. But he was playing a Chopin, is that how you say it?
Oh, yeah, Chopin piece. Chopin,
yeah. He actually made a joke as well when he's like, an audience member came up to him, like a teenager, and he was like, oh, mate, that shopping piece you played was so good. But yeah, he played the piece, and he was talking about, he was kind of teaching the audience how to listen to it, in like, not in a stuck up, pretentious way. He was just saying, think
Yeah.
about a loved one as you listen to this, and it changed how they heard the music.
It's so, I just love it. It's so interesting.
Mm.
There's so many things as well, like that might be really. I did a thing in second year where I was doing a sonography project, so I didn't really look into it that much, but I looked into chromesthesia, which is when people hear colours when they hear music.
Oh yeah, Kanye West has this apparently. He says.
Yeah. This is the thing. There's no way to actually know if like people do when they're like, "Oh, I've got it." I'm like,
yeah.
But I spoke to this girl at Royal Holloway who had it, and she sent me this. She was a music student. She sent me her score, and across the score, she coloured in the colours that she heard.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm gonna have a go at this. I listened to a piece and did colours and did this painting as I was listening to it, and I got Shuri to do the same thing for me. And weirdly, we both picked quite similar colours, but
wow.
the girl that actually had chromesthesia didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really interesting how people hear that, but there's all these different things apparently with music where, yeah, I don't know.
That's really cool because the way you or I would do it is the colours that are associated with certain feelings. So for example, if I say blue, everyone's gonna think blue is sad, down.
Yeah.
Whereas red is stereotypically very in your face, loud. And our kind of associations are social, they're socially based. Whereas with someone who has that condition, that kind of filter isn't there. It's a direct connection.
And what was it's so true, because what was so interesting is when I was doing it, I was just kind of listening, as you say, as a whole, how does this make me feel? How does this section, make me feel, okay, well, that feeling feels red, so I'll put that down. But with hers, there were sometimes specific notes that were a different color.
Oh.
So sometimes she would hear notes and she would color them in orange, and every time, I have to see if I can find the pictures that she sent me. Every time she sent the thing, played just that single note, it would be the same color. So it wasn't just a case of
she's not just making it up.
Yeah,
there's
it was very much
to it. Yeah,
it was so interesting. I was like, wow.
Unless she's having you on, she's just got a colour chart with a scale and different colours for each note.
Imagine she's just this will get me a great grade. Quite smart. Well, if you're listening to classical music at the moment, you should listen to Ludovico Einaudi, because he's a modern composer, and he is honestly just he's probably one of my favorite composers. He's just incredible, and his music is so simple, but it's just so beautiful. And he's written loads of amazing pieces. Nuvole Bianche.
Yeah, I've just found it now.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favourites. But he also wrote this piece called...
is it Una Mattina?
No, but that was good too. It was about something the Arctic. And if you watch the music video, he's playing the piano on a block of ice in the middle of the Arctic. And as he's playing it, all around him, the icebergs are falling and crumbling.
Yeah.
And the piece is if you listen to it technically, there's sections in it that run downwards. So it'd be as if the sheets are falling down. And then there's these big loud chords at the bottom to represent, well, this is just how I hear it, but to represent when they're crashing into the water. It's amazing. Just watch the video.
That's
for
so
it.
Cool. Yeah.
It's something. If you type in Ludovico Einaudi Arctic, it'll come up.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check that out. That sounds cool.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it literally made me cry. It's only a minute, but it was amazing. Yeah.
One of my favorite artists is Jamie XX. Do you know?
Oh yeah.
I'd say he's one of, if not my favorite artist, for various reasons. And I found out recently, I just came across it, he was the composer or I think it was composer, for an opera for an opera
Oh
piece.
wow.
Called Tree of Codes.
Oh okay. Wow, that's
Um,
amazing.
and that was so cool. I was like, yeah, I already loved him enough, and now he's
And then you
done
did that.
theatre, and I'm like, yes. But I
That's
thought that was so
amazing.
cool because his music is, it's electronic music.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like,
it's that completely other spectrum.
yeah. But I want to hear the score. Like, I wish I could hear the score, but I couldn't find it anywhere.
Oh,
And obviously, it's a live, live. Like, it's a live performance, and it's not. There's no
was
recording
it
that
just
I
a
could
one time?
find. It toured, I think. I think it toured for a bit.
Oh,
But that it was like a while back. But I thought that was
oh,
pretty cool.
yeah. That's amazing. I think it is the case a lot of the time. Like really good artists, like have like a background in like a completely different genre.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, a lot of things I'm doing at the moment are bringing things together and trying to find similarities between what are perceived as widely different practices. And you'd be surprised how many links there are. Like,
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Like, any form of dance will in some way relate to ballet, and like people don't think it does, but like I can't like tell people enough like how like even movement in itself, like everything, like because it was like the form, like the original form of dance, I guess.
right, yeah.
I don't know. There's so many things. Like someone will be like, "Oh, bend your legs there," and I'm like, "You're essentially doing a plie. Like it's exactly the same movement. You're just changing like your foot, the way your foot's positioned, or like I don't know. There's just even like hip hop. Like I see Mo doing hip hop, and I'm like, there's things in it that are like they all relate to each other.
Yeah, see, I need to look at ballet because that's one thing I've not looked at yet. Because I'm a bit of a hater on ballet because I'm like, oh, it's so codified and there's like so many rules. This is my perception, and this is from someone who doesn't know a lot about ballet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's so many rules and things, and it trains people out of their bodies. So because then the things they learn, like pointing your toes, carries on into other movements, and you have to tell actors not to point their toes when doing certain things.
Yeah, that is true. Like, yeah, to an extent.
But I'm sure if I actually look at ballet, I'll see what you're saying right now, and I'll be like, oh, okay, I see this now. Like that thing she's doing right there, or that thing he's doing right there is from. I can see that similarity from yoga. I can see that similarity from like this martial art or like jiu-jitsu or something that's completely different.
Yeah, but see, I think the thing about ballet, which like people don't realize, is it's not just the classical ballet. Like that's a form of ballet, and it's the one that people always think, oh, ballet is, point shoes. It's all of that.
Yeah.
Like there are so many modern ballets and like different versions that you'd watch it and you go, this isn't ballet, but it is. It's just it's just a different. It's called. So you have classical, and then you have contemporary ballet. I forgot what it's called then. It's like classical and contemporary. And the contemporary stuff, like I've been watching some more stuff on it. Like even have you heard of Matthew Bourne and Swan Lake? Well, Swan Lake, yeah, but Matthew Bourne, Swan Lake.
Maybe. I feel like I watched a video recently.
Yeah, it's the most famous
like contemporary,
like non-classical ballet. Yeah, because it's still quite traditional in its form. It's probably like one of the first times they'd probably done it, and he he did his own version of Swan Lake with an all-male cast. So like both the swans are male swans, and like the whole thing was just like the way it was choreographed was so different to the original. And it's quite famous. I still haven't watched it, but I've seen clips of it. But it, like that in itself was so different because all of a sudden it was like not the male-female partnering that you always see in classical ballet.
Yeah.
It was like this whole, and like that just like changed how ballet happened. And like now, like I see some of the stuff and I'm like it just doesn't look like it. Like a lot of dances, even in the traditional ballets, like Swan Lake or the Nutcracker or whatever, they have in it like separate dances, like the Spanish dance, the Russian dance, the Chinese dance, and it's all like different moves that are associated with like that country. But then, like now, like all of that influence, because that was obviously just a section of the classical ballet, has like worked its way into like modern ballet. Do you know what? I'm gonna find like 2 videos of things that you wouldn't think would be ballet, and I'll send it to you, and you'll be like, "What? This is not ballet." But that's what I'll do.
To go for it, yeah. No, that sounds really good, and especially today where gender roles are being, broken down, and it's not the class like the guy should do this, the girl should do this. Things like that. Contemporary ballet is what it is. It's contemporary, like it's new and it's up to scratch with the current times. From what you're saying.
And I think because they're so strong as well, like because they're dancers and they literally like train their bodies, that like they're able to support each other. But yeah, I don't know. Going back to musical director stuff, like, was there anything else you wanted to ask?
I was actually So you're ballet trained, right? Or
yeah.
How long did you do ballet for?
Quite a long time. I started when I was 2.5. You're not meant to start really till you're 3, but I cried.
2.5.
Yeah,
God.
I know. I cried because I wanted to do it. And you know what's really funny is I'm really not flexible, like, at all. And that's partly why I stopped, because I got probably as far as I was able to get with it. So I did all my grades. I did my grade 8. And then you start what's known as like the professional qualifications. So I did the first 2 of them. So I did my intermediate foundation, and then I did my intermediate.
And what age were you? What age were you when you did those?
I was 18 when I finished, so that was when I did my intermediate. I was just 18. And then, so that's 15 years?
Yeah.
Often what happens is when you're like 11, 12, if you're good enough, you'll get taken on by a ballet school.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'm trained enough that in the future, if I want to become a teacher, I have enough qualifications to be able to go to the Royal Academy of Dance in London and get trained and become a teacher.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool.
That's such an asset to have as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd have to do, I think it's like a 1-year, 2-year course, so I'm going to probably think about that like a lot further down the line, like a lot further if it's something I wanted to do. But yeah, and I did the English Youth Ballet when I was 16, 17. And we did Swan Lake, that's why I know it so well. And I was a swan and a Spanish dancer, which was quite cool.
Were you the main swan or the black swan?
No. So they had professional dancers that played all the main roles.
Right. Okay.
So no, I was not. But no, I got to like a quite like good level with it. But I'm just not flexible enough to be a dancer. And I think I got to I didn't scrape my last exam. I got a merit, but I got away with a lot of the dancing because I was able to like express, whereas a lot of other dancers, as you say with ballet, like you're trained, this is what you do with your leg, this is what you do here, whereas I got away with it because I was able to like dance with the top bit, and they could kind of forgive that I maybe wasn't like that flexible in terms of like how high I could kick my leg or whatever. Can
you not train flexibility in though? Is that not something you could have worked towards?
Yeah, probably, but I was always told, when I was in China, it was a very different story. I was told I would never be a dancer, I would never make it past my grade 4, and I wasn't flexible enough because my hips are too narrow. That's what I was told, like,
right.
Like, they literally said that to me, like, you'll never do it, like, end of, you won't get past grade 4. And then I came to the UK, and it was the first time I'd been allowed to, like, choreograph, and it was the first time I'd been allowed to, like just kind of dance it and not have to like do everything exactly perfect and exactly right.
Yeah.
And I remember like my first lesson, she was like, "Oh, okay, like there's 8 bars here, like you can just choreograph what you want to do." I literally stood there and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like I'd never done it before, so I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And like the more and more I did it, like my teacher I was really lucky actually. She was just so good at being able to like say to me just like, because I had quite expressive arms, like that's what they always used to do. It sounds weird saying it like this, but I had very like an expressive like top half, and just not a very flexible bottom half. But I was able to like get away with it by like just dancing it and just like smiling and just being like, look at my face, not my legs. So yeah, there you go. But yeah, no, ballet was like a very like big part of my life at school.
Because I've heard horror stories of ballet schools turning away people because they just like of how they look. They just say, you don't have the right body for it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the end of your years and years of training as a ballet dancer. Like that's it.
Yeah, I won't lie. That's 100% true.
Which 100%. Is heartbreaking. Like I couldn't imagine. The thing is, I guess seeing it from like a sporting perspective, I kind of get what they mean, because in sports, I know there's certain countries and certain sporting like boards that measure you up and say, well, if you're not over this height, you can't play this sport professionally. Like we're not going to train you. Or if you're not of a certain, look at boxing, for example, like if you're not of a certain weight, you can't even qualify for a fight.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite similar in ballet. Like if you're a guy and you're too short, you won't be able to do it because they want you to be taller than the girl, because you have to support them and lift them over your head. And if you're a girl and you're too tall, it's not going to work because you'll be taller than the guy. Which is why, obviously, I guess that's kind of why contemporary ballet has come into play a lot more, because, like, the boundaries go then, you can kind of do anything.
Yeah, which is good. And, like, I'd really question that, because I'd want to know if that's an aesthetic thing or a functional thing. Because if it's a functional thing, then, okay, hands up, that's fair enough. Like, if you literally can't do the things you're trying to do with a mismatch of heights. But then I know for a fact that just being shorter than someone doesn't mean you can't lift them over your head.
Yeah. No, it's 100% an aesthetic thing. It's a classical ballet like has to look and be a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's very it 100% is. But yeah, it's not right really. I had a friend who was like a beautiful dancer, but she was so tall, and she was told by the teachers in China, like, you're not going to be able to like do it professionally because you're going to be too tall. And it's just, it is heartbreaking. And I know, like, China's a different story. China was so strict. Here, not so much. They kind of, especially if you're just doing it in like class, but in China, even if you're just going to like your local class, like, they were savage, like absolutely savage. They tried to get me onto point when I was like 7, 8, and my mom turned around and went, no, like, no, she's not, like, her feet, like, you can't. You're meant to basically progress all the way. With girl dances, it's so annoying. You train all the way up and you learn how to do everything, and then you learn how to do point, and you go back to the beginning, and you have to learn how to do everything all over again, but in point.
Right.
Because you have to be able to do both. So that's why it's they try and get you on earlier, especially like in China and Russia, because then you've got more time to like improve. But yeah, no, we changed dance schools after that because my mum was like, no, she's too young. She can't do that. Like, absolutely not.
That sounds bonkers.
Yeah, it's painful.
My flexibility and my kind of mobility was terrible before. Like, it was really bad. And I didn't know how bad it was until I started doing more flexibility and mobility stuff recently.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can like go on my... And this is crazy, thinking that I've been playing badminton since I was tiny, like since I was like a toddler. And badminton is entirely played on your toes.
Yeah.
And I only recently have now, like, I can go up. I find it so much easier to go up onto my toes, and I can go higher on my toes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just like, this is crazy. Like, I could never do this before, and only just stretching things out and doing that, I can now do it. And then I was thinking about ballet, and that's like a whole nother level. Like, you're literally on your toe. Like, not like I'm talking about when I say go on your toes, I mean like the balls of my feet. I don't mean my toes. But in ballet, you're literally going on your toe, right?
Yeah. So that's why you have to train your body. That's why my mum's like, she's too young to go on it, because you're literally putting your entire weight on your two toes.
Yeah.
Like literally just your.
And then jumping onto it as well, which sounds so painful. Like I don't want to do that. It doesn't sound appealing to me as well.
Yeah, it's a bit mad. Someone said to me, they were like, inside your foot are your feet like scrunched up, so that when you go up, you're on the balls of your toes. I was like, no, they're flat, and you walk like a duck when you're just walking. Yeah, no, it is a bit mad actually, but. You have to like, that's why you're constantly trained to like lift everything up.
Yeah.
And you just like pull everything in, and the shoe does like, you obviously like, I could now just go onto my tippy toe like that would, like, you just couldn't do it. But with the shoe on it, I don't know, have you ever tried it with trainers where you kind of go up and you're able to do it a little bit?
Yeah, I know what you mean, because it supports your foot. It's not like you're literally just on your toe. Yeah,
it's that sort of feeling, but. It hurts, like it.
I can imagine,
obviously not when you're doing it, it's okay. But if you're on, like when you're rehearsing a lot, like when I did English Youth Ballet, I'd not really done much point before. I'd only done it a little bit in class because weirdly for the exams you don't really do much point, and then all of a sudden like you're meant to be a professional and just do it. But in English Youth Ballet we were on point as swans, and I'd never been doing it for Bella. I'd never been doing it for that long. And I remember my feet used to kill because you take the shoe off, and it literally just used to hurt. And like you'd have to like wrap like bandages around your toes and stuff if they were like rubbing against each other. And we had this one, the principal of like English Youth Ballet, and she came into our rehearsal when we were doing the swan stuff. And we'd been on point for like a while, and the lady that was running it was lovely with us, and she knew that we were all like fairly new to point, and like gave us quite a few breaks to take our shoes off and like make sure that like we weren't aching. And we were just about to go for a break, and she kept us behind for like half an hour, and she's like, keep going. And at that point, when your feet are aching that much, and you've then got to like keep going back on them and like support your whole body, like, painful, the pain.
That separates the weak from the strong though. She knows what she's doing.
It is like whiplash. It's like whiplash.
It is like whiplash, yeah.
When he like keeps making them battle it out.
Yeah, I just watched The Last Dance. Have you seen it on Netflix?
No, I haven't yet.
It's so good. Like, as someone who plays sport and like has done dance and all that stuff, it's nothing to do with dance, but still, it's called The Last Dance. But yeah, it's about Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls and like their kind of rise to success.
Yeah.
And it's so good. Like when a couple of people recommended it to me and they said, you'd really enjoy it. And I was like, I don't know, like, I'm not a big basketball fan. Like, you know, I know who Michael Jordan is, but I'm not really like a big fan or anything like that. But they're like, okay, yeah, can I recommend it to me? A couple, Azan did, like my cousin Zara did. And eventually I got around to watching it because I was just watching loads of motivational stuff. And I was like, God, then I'll give it a watch. And it's actually one of the best shows I've ever seen.
Oh, really?
Like, one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, I'd say.
Right. I'll have to watch then, because I was quite similar to you. I was not particularly bothered by it.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't really see what the hype is about and all that. But then I watched it. It's so good. And even if you're not someone who plays sports or enjoys sport or anything like that, it's so motivating and actually quite dramatic. Like, there's things that happen that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to this person.
Oh, really?
And they carried on doing what they're doing.
Oh, that's mad. I'll have to, I'll give that a watch then.
Yeah, no, really, really good. Definitely recommend it.
Yeah, that sounds so good.
I'm losing my voice.
So am I, that's how much
It's because I didn't warm up before.
Yeah, see, there you go. That's why. Well, after all of that, I should probably let you go.
Yeah. Cheers.
Okay.
Thanks for this.
Yeah, thanks so much for messaging me to speak. It was such a nice chat. Okay, well, enjoy your evening. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, you too. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.